The crystal glasses clinked as Roland raised his for a toast at Bellissimo's, where he'd first proposed to me 4 decades earlier. Our children, Lyra and Dominic, smiled expectantly. Our closest friends, the Hargroves and the Castellanos, leaned forward in anticipation. The candlelight flickered across Roland's face, highlighting the silver at his temples. Silver I'd watched gradually replace the chestnut brown I'd fallen in love with at Westlake University. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I smoothed my silk dress, the midnight blue one I'd spent weeks selecting for our anniversary, and felt the weight of the vintage sapphire bracelet he'd given me on our 25th. 40 years of memories, sacrifices, and shared dreams hovered around. Us like ghosts. The ring on my finger had grown to feel like part of my skin, so permanent I barely noticed it anymore. Much like our marriage itself. I expected a sentimental speech about our years together. Instead, Roland cleared his throat and said, "Before we order, there's someone I'd like you all to meet." He gestured toward the restaurant entrance, where Imara Chen, his 33-year-old chief innovation officer, stood in a red dress that hugged every curve of her body. Our guests turned in confusion as she approached our table with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Roland stood to pull out a chair for her, right next to his. He'd never once done that for me in all our years. Together, everyone, Roland announced with an uncomfortable half-smile. Imara and I have been seeing each other for the past year. We've fallen in love, and I've asked her to marry me once my divorce from Octavia is finalized. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the soft jazz from the restaurant speakers, the clink of silverware from distant tables, even the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. 40 years of marriage dismissed in a single sentence. Lyra's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the table. Dominic half rose from his chair, his face contorted with rage. Our friends sat frozen, eyes wide with shock. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply dabbed the corner of my mouth with my napkin and reached for my purse. Roland looked relieved by my composure. He always did underestimate me. "I think it's only fair," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane raging inside me, "that I share some news of my own." I removed a small manila envelope from my clutch. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the majority shareholder and new chief executive officer of Blackridge Enterprises. Roland's smug smile vanished. The blood drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. "That's not possible," he whispered. I smiled. "Oh, but it is. And we have quite a lot to discuss about the company's future direction." I stood, smoothed my dress, and addressed our stunned audience. "I apologize for cutting our celebration short, but I have an early meeting tomorrow with the board. Dinner is on me. Please, enjoy yourselves." Before I walked away from the table that had been meant to celebrate 4 decades of partnership, I leaned down and whispered in Roland's ear, "You really should have paid more attention to who was actually running your company all these years. My name is Octavia Blackridge, though for most of my adult life I was simply Mrs. Roland Blackridge to the world. The supportive wife, the gracious hostess, the silent partner. At 65, I was supposed to be settling into a comfortable retirement, watching our grandchildren grow while Roland continued to bask in the glory of building Blackridge Enterprises from the ground up. That was the story he told, how he, the brilliant visionary from modest beginnings, had created a technology empire through sheer determination and genius. The rags to riches tale he repeated at every industry dinner, every charity gala, every press interview. What the story conveniently omitted was me. I met Roland during our final year at Westlake University. I was completing my double major in computer engineering and business with honors, already being courted by 3 major tech firms. He was charming, ambitious, and struggling to complete his marketing degree. We fell in love over late-night study sessions where I tutored him through his final exams. After graduation, I accepted a position at Horizon Technologies, my dream job with a promising career path. Roland struggled to find work, bouncing between entry-level sales positions. 6 months later, he came to me with an idea for a software company but no technical knowledge to build it. I spent weekends and evenings coding the prototype while maintaining my day job. When Roland secured a meeting with potential investors, he begged me to help prepare his pitch. "Just this once," he promised. "Once we get the seed funding, we'll hire a proper development team, and you can go back to your career." Believing in him, in us, I took 2 weeks of vacation to perfect the prototype and presentation. The investors loved it. They offered $750,000 in seed funding, with one condition: Roland needed a technical co-founder who understood the product. That night, over champagne, he proposed both marriage and partnership. "We'll build this together," he promised, eyes shining with excitement. "Your brilliance and my business sense will be unstoppable." 3 months later, we were married in a small ceremony at Celestial Gardens. I resigned from Horizon to work full-time on our startup, which we named Blackridge Enterprises, after Roland's grandfather who had instilled his entrepreneurial spirit. The early years were exhilarating. We worked 18-hour days in a converted warehouse in the industrial district of Meridian City. I led product development while Roland handled sales and marketing. When investors visited, we presented as all equal partners. Behind closed doors, we celebrated each milestone together, dreaming of the empire we would build. Our first major product, SecureNet, revolutionized network security for small businesses. The industry took notice. Tech magazines wanted interviews. Roland suggested he handle media relations since my time was better spent on development. "Besides," he added with a wink, "you hate the spotlight." It was true. I preferred coding to cameras. So I agreed, not realizing this small decision would set a pattern for the next 4 decades. Our second year brought 2 major changes: our first round of significant funding and my pregnancy with Lyra. As my due date approached, Roland hired a junior developer to temporarily assist with my workload. Xavier Thornfield was fresh out of college, talented but inexperienced. "Just until you're back on your feet," Roland assured me. "You can manage from home part-time while caring for the baby." Managing remotely proved challenging in the days before sophisticated collaboration tools. Xavier needed constant guidance, which I provided via late-night phone calls while nursing Lyra. Roland began taking Xavier to investor meetings to give the technical perspective while I recovered. By the time Lyra was 6 months old, I noticed a subtle shift. Industry publications referred to Roland Blackridge and his team, rather than the Blackridges. When I mentioned it, Roland dismissed my concerns. "It's just easier for branding, darling. Everyone knows we're partners." I returned to the office to find Xavier sitting at my desk, now titled Lead Developer. Roland had moved my workspace to a smaller office to accommodate my need for privacy as a new mother. The arrangement was presented as temporary, but it normalized a new hierarchy. Roland and Xavier became the faces of Blackridge while I worked behind the scenes. 3 years later, Dominic was born. By then, Blackridge had grown to 30 employees and moved to sleek offices in downtown Meridian City. My role had evolved into leading research and development, but increasingly, Roland presented my innovations as collaborative efforts or credited them to the development team. At company functions, I was introduced as Roland's wife first, head of R&D second. In press features, Roland was the visionary founder, with brief mentions of a talented technical team. My contributions were systematically minimized, but I told myself it didn't matter. We were building something together, regardless of who received the public recognition. When the children started school, I suggested returning to a more visible leadership role. Roland responded with plans for our first home. We need a proper place to raise the children, he insisted. Something befitting our success. He found an estate in Aurelian Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in Meridian City. A 7-bedroom manor with manicured gardens and a view of Crescent Lake. The price was staggering, requiring most of my grandparents' inheritance, which I'd been saving for the children's education. It's an investment in our future, Roland argued. Real estate in Aurelian Heights only appreciates. For practicality, he suggested putting the property solely in his name since the company carries enough liability risk for one of us. I agreed, trusting that what was his was also mine. The house came with social obligations. Suddenly, I was expected to host dinner parties for investors, organize charity galas, and manage an extensive household staff. My hours at the office diminished, as my duties as Mrs. Blackridge expanded. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Meanwhile, Blackridge Enterprises continued to grow. We acquired smaller competitors, expanded internationally, and developed new product lines, many based on concepts I'd originated. For our 15th anniversary, Roland surprised me with a vacation to the Celestial Islands. On our private villa's balcony, overlooking turquoise waters, he presented me with a diamond tennis bracelet. "You deserve this and so much more," he said, kissing my hand. "I couldn't have built Blackridge without you." Those moments sustained me, the private acknowledgments of my value, even as my public role diminished. I told myself they were enough. As the children grew, I channeled my technical passions into their education. Lyra inherited my aptitude for mathematics, while Dominic showed remarkable creativity with digital design. I taught them programming before they were teenagers, building home projects that kept my skills sharp. By our 25th anniversary, Blackridge Enterprises had become Blackridge Technologies, a publicly traded company with over 5,000 employees globally. Roland's net worth was estimated at $340 million. Note the phrasing, Roland's net worth, not ours, despite the fact that I owned 22% of the company's shares to his 30%. The press called him a self-made tech mogul. Profiles in business magazines detailed his singular vision and revolutionary approach. When occasionally asked about me, he would smile and say, "Octavia is the wind beneath my wings. She keeps our home life running smoothly so I can focus on business." I had become invisible, a footnote in my own life story. The pivotal moment came during the development of Nexus, our most ambitious platform to date. The project was struggling. The architecture couldn't handle the scalability requirements. Late one night, after everyone had left the office, I returned to my roots, spending 14 straight hours coding. I restructured the entire framework, solving problems that had stumped our development team for months. When the solution worked, I called Roland, exhilarated. He rushed to the office, marveling at what I'd accomplished. "This is brilliant, Octavia. You've saved the project." The next morning, I arrived to find Roland in a meeting with the executive team, presenting my solution. "I had a breakthrough last night," he told them, walking through the architecture I'd designed as if it were his own. Something broke inside me. Not dramatically. There was no confrontation, no outburst, just a quiet realization that I had allowed myself to be erased. After the meeting, I approached Roland privately. "That was my solution, Roland. My code, my architecture." He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before his expression shifted to defensive irritation. "We're a team, Octavia. Everything. We do benefits, both of us. Does it really matter who gets credit in an internal meeting?" "It matters to me." "Don't be petty," he said, checking his watch. "I have investors waiting. We'll discuss this later." We never did. From that day forward, I began documenting everything. Every line of code I wrote, every solution I developed, every strategy I suggested. I created private repositories and secure cloud storage outside the company network. I wasn't planning anything specific. I was simply creating a record of my existence, my contributions, my value. I also began attending shareholder meetings, reviewing financial reports, and studying the legal structure of Blackridge Technologies. Roland found my sudden interest amusing. "Finally taking an interest in the business side, darling? After all these years?" I smiled and said nothing. Let him believe I was a bored empty nester looking for a hobby. 3 years ago, I noticed something concerning in the quarterly reports, inconsistencies in the research and development expenditures. Tracing the discrepancies required careful investigation, but eventually I discovered Roland had created a separate company, Phoenix Innovations, registered in the Cayman Islands. He was funneling Blackridge intellectual property, much of it my work, through this entity, licensing it back to Blackridge at inflated rates. The scheme allowed him to extract millions from Blackridge while maintaining plausible deniability. Most of the board were his longtime friends who asked few questions. The arrangement wasn't technically illegal due to clever legal structuring, but it violated the spirit of his fiduciary duty to shareholders. More personally, it violated his duty to me. I kept this discovery to myself, continuing my investigation. I learned that Phoenix Innovations had been established around the same time Roland hired Imara Chen as Chief Innovation Officer, a position created specifically for her, bypassing normal hiring protocols. Their affair had likely been going on for years, not the single year he claimed at our anniversary dinner. Rather than confronting him immediately, I consulted Sofia Mendez, an old university friend who had become one of the country's top corporate attorneys. Without disclosing specifics, I outlined the situation and asked for her advice. "If what you're describing is accurate," she said, "you have leverage, but you need more than suspicions. You need documentation, witnesses, and a strategy." For the next 2 years, I methodically built my case. I identified key shareholders who might be sympathetic to my concerns. I documented the technical innovations that had originated with me but been attributed to others. I traced the money flowing through Phoenix Innovations back to private accounts. 6 months ago, I approached Vernon Hargrove, our largest institutional investor and a longtime family friend. I showed him evidence of Roland's financial improprieties and my uncredited contributions to the company's core technologies. Vernon was shocked, not just by Roland's actions, but by the extent of my involvement in Blackridge's success. "I had no idea," he admitted. "All these years I thought you were just the supportive wife," I finished for him. "I'm sorry, Octavia. This changes everything." Together with Vernon and 2 other significant shareholders, I developed a plan to restructure Blackridge's leadership. Roland's financial maneuvers had left the company vulnerable. My technical expertise was essential to its continued success. The board meeting was scheduled for the morning of our 40th anniversary. The timing wasn't my choice, but it seemed fitting somehow, a symmetry to the beginning and end of our partnership. I sat silently as Vernon presented the evidence of financial impropriety. Roland denied everything at first, then attempted to justify his actions as standard industry practice. When confronted with documentation of my technical contributions, he dismissed them as supportive work rather than innovation. The final vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Roland was removed as CEO, and I was appointed in his place. His shares weren't seized, that would require legal proceedings, but his control of the company was effectively terminated. He left the boardroom without looking at me, already on his phone, likely calling Imara to adjust their dinner plans. Our anniversary dinner would now serve a different purpose than the one he had planned. And so, 40 years after saying I do to a partnership of equals, I sat across from my husband at Bellissimo's and watched him introduce his mistress to our children. The pain was real. 4 decades of shared history doesn't disappear in an instant, but underneath was something else. Liberation. That night, as I left Roland sitting stunned at our anniversary dinner, I felt lighter than I had in years. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in decades, it was truly mine to choose. The morning after our anniversary dinner, I woke in the guest bedroom of our Aurelian Heights estate. I hadn't slept in our master suite since discovering Roland's affair 6 months earlier. He hadn't noticed, or if he hadn't cared enough to ask why. My phone chimed with messages from Lyra and Dominic, both asking to meet. News of their father's announcement and my countermove had clearly shaken them to their core. I texted, back suggesting brunch at Hearthstone Cafe, neutral ground where we could speak privately. I dressed carefully in a tailored charcoal suit, my armor for the day ahead. My first official board meeting as CEO was scheduled for 3 p.m. After 40 years of being underestimated, I wanted no ambiguity about who was in charge now. As I descended the grand staircase, I found Roland in the foyer, removing framed photographs from the walls. He looked disheveled, his usual polished appearance frayed at the edges. He didn't acknowledge my presence until I was directly behind him. "Taking souvenirs?" I asked. He turned, bags under his eyes betraying a sleepless night. "These are my personal effects." I glanced at the photographs. Roland receiving innovation awards, Roland at charity galas, Roland shaking hands with tech luminaries, all carefully curated to tell the story of his success. "By all means," I said, "though I'm not sure Imara will want her new home decorated with your past glory." His expression darkened. "This isn't over, Octavia. The board may have temporarily sided with you, but I still own 28% of Blackridge." 23%, I corrected. "You transferred 5% to Phoenix Innovations last quarter. I've frozen those assets pending investigation." His face paled. "You can't." "I already have. The SEC is quite interested in the creative accounting you've been doing." I checked my watch. "I'm meeting the children for brunch. We have a lot to discuss after your performance last night." "They're my children too," he said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "Yes, they are. Perhaps you should have considered that before introducing them to your mistress on our anniversary." I left him standing among the remnants of his carefully constructed narrative, frames scattered across the marble floor like broken promises. Hearthstone Cafe occupied the ground floor of a converted textile mill in the Arts District. Exposed, brick walls, reclaimed wood tables, and abundant natural light made it feel worlds away from the corporate polish of Blackridge or the studied opulence of our Aurelian Heights estate. Lyra and Dominic had already claimed a corner table by the time I arrived. At 38 and 35 respectively, they were accomplished adults with their own lives, yet in that moment, they looked like confused children again. Lyra's usually immaculate appearance was rumpled, her dark hair hastily pulled back. Dominic's eyes were red-rimmed behind his glasses. I hugged them both before sitting down, grateful when the server immediately brought coffee without being asked. "I've ordered your usual," Lyra said, her voice measured in the way it always was when she was processing difficult emotions. She had inherited that from me. The ability to compartmentalize, to appear calm while her mind worked through complex problems. "Thank you, sweetheart." I doctored my coffee with a splash of cream, giving them time to gather their thoughts. Dominic broke first. "Were you ever going to tell us about taking over Blackridge?" "Yes, but not like this. Your father forced my hand with his announcement." "And the affair?" Lyra asked, her fingers tightening around her mug. "How long have you known?" "About Imara specifically? 6 months? That there was someone? Probably years." I kept my voice even. It wasn't my first concern when I discovered what was happening at the company. "What exactly is happening?" Dominic leaned forward, the tech journalist in him hungry for details. I gave them the abbreviated version. The financial improprieties, the systemic erasure of my contributions, the shell company. Their expressions shifted from shock to anger to a strange sort of pride as the story unfolded. I always wondered why you stayed in the background, Lyra said softly. Growing up, I thought it was because you weren't interested in the business. That's what your father wanted everyone to think, including me, eventually. But you built Blackridge together, Dominic said. The early code for SecureNet, that was yours, wasn't it? You taught me basic programming using those same principles. Yes, and Deep Shield, NetVault, and most of the Nexus architecture. I smiled wryly, though you won't find my name on any of the patents. That's why you insisted I register my software designs in my own name, even when I was just starting out, Lyra realized. You didn't want me to make the same mistake. I wanted you both to own your accomplishments, to never let anyone, partner, boss, or colleague, diminish your contributions. The server brought our food, avocado toast for Lyra, a veggie hash for Dominic, and a simple omelet for me. We ate in silence for a few minutes, each processing the seismic shift in our family narrative. What happens now? Dominic finally asked. With the company? With you and Dad? The company will continue operating. I'll be overseeing a full audit and restructuring some departments. As for your father and me, I set down my fork. After 40 years, I think it's time to admit this marriage has run its course. He'll fight you on this, Lyra warned. Dad doesn't lose gracefully. I'm counting on it, I replied. In fact, I'm prepared for it. After brunch, I hugged my children goodbye with promises to keep them updated. I watched them walk away, arm in arm, and felt a profound relief. They knew the truth now, not just about their father's affair, but about my role in creating the company that had defined our family. Whatever happened next, that recognition couldn't be taken away. My driver, Ellis, waited patiently in the town car. To the office, Mrs. Blackridge? Yes, please, and Ellis. From now on, please call me Ms. Thorne. Taking back my maiden name was a small act of reclamation, but it felt significant. The first of many steps toward redefining myself outside of Roland's shadow. The Blackridge Technologies headquarters occupied a gleaming 30-story tower in downtown Meridian City. The building itself had been my design project 10 years earlier when we outgrew our previous space. I'd worked closely with the architects to create an environment that balanced innovation with sustainability, insisting on rooftop gardens, natural light, and collaborative spaces long before they became industry standards. As the elevator ascended to the executive floor, I reflected on how rarely I'd visited in recent years. Roland had gradually pushed me to the periphery, suggesting my presence confused the reporting structure. I'd allowed it, focusing instead on R&D projects I could manage remotely. The executive suite had been redecorated since my last visit, all cool grays and blues with minimalist furniture. Roland's aesthetics, not mine. His office dominated the corner position with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and the lake beyond. His former assistant, Margot, looked up in surprise as I approached. Mrs. Blackridge, we weren't expecting you until the board meeting. Ms. Thorne, I corrected gently. And I'm early intentionally. I'd like to review some files before the meeting. Confusion flickered across her face. Of course. Should I show you to the visitors' conference room? No, I'll be using the CEO's office. Her eyes widened. But Mr. Blackridge is no longer CEO. I am. I softened my tone. You'll receive the official announcement shortly, but the board voted on the change yesterday. Margot's professional composure reasserted itself almost immediately. I understand. Would you like coffee while you settle in? Please. And Margot? I'd like you to stay on as my assistant if you're willing. Your institutional knowledge would be invaluable during this transition. Relief washed over her features. Thank you, Ms. Thorne. I'd be happy to continue in the role. Roland's, now, my office was a shrine to his ego, Awards lined the bookshelves, magazine covers featuring his face adorned the walls, and a massive desk dominated the center of the room like a throne. The only personal touch was a small silver frame on the credenza containing our wedding photo, a peculiar choice for a man planning to leave his wife for another woman. I set my briefcase on the desk and began methodically removing Roland's personal items, placing them in an empty storage box Margot had provided. The wedding photo I placed face down in the drawer. Later, I would bring my own touches to the space, but for now, neutralizing it was enough. Margot returned with coffee and a stack of folders. The quarterly reports you requested, and the board meeting agenda. Is there anything else you need before the meeting? Yes, please ask Xavier Thornfield and Amara Chen to come see me immediately. Margot hesitated. Ms. Chen called in sick today. Did she? How convenient. Ask Xavier to come alone then. Xavier had aged well into his 50s. His formerly lanky frame filled out, his once shaggy brown hair now stylishly gray at the temples. He entered with the confidence of a man who had spent decades as Roland's right hand, but faltered visibly upon seeing me behind the desk. Octavia? What's going on? Where's Roland? Please sit down, Xavier. I gestured to the chair across from me. Roland has been removed as CEO. I've been appointed by the board to replace him. Xavier's surprise gave way to calculation. I could practically see him reassessing his position, evaluating his options. He had built his career in Roland's shadow, much as I had, but with one crucial difference. He had been credited for his work. I see. May I ask why? Financial improprieties, breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of intellectual property. I opened one of the folders Margot had provided. And systemic erasure of my contributions to this company's success. Xavier had the grace to look uncomfortable. Octavia, I never— Let me be clear, I interrupted. I'm not here to litigate the past. I'm interested in Blackridge's future. You've been a valuable part of this company for decades. I hope you'll continue to be. Relief softened his features. Of course, whatever you need. Good, because what I need right now is honesty. What do you know about Phoenix Innovations? His expression shuddered. Not much. It's one of our technology partners based overseas. I believe they license some of our security protocols. Try again, Xavier. This time without the corporate speak. He sighed, shoulders slumping. It's Roland's side project. He set it up about 3 years ago, right after hiring Imara. They use it to redirect certain assets. Go on. Roland would identify promising technologies within Blackridge, ones with significant potential, but not yet fully developed or patented. He'd transfer the initial research to Phoenix, where Imara's team would complete the development. Then Phoenix would license the finished technology back to Blackridge. At inflated rates, I added. Xavier nodded uncomfortably. Yes. The arrangement funneled money out of Blackridge and into Phoenix, which Roland and Imara controlled privately. And you were aware of this the entire time? I raised concerns initially, he said, a defensive note creeping into his voice. Roland assured me it was all above board, structured by corporate counsel. When I pushed further, he implied my position could be reconsidered. I studied him thoughtfully. Xavier wasn't blameless, but he wasn't the architect either. He was what most people were, someone trying to protect his livelihood in a system designed by others. I'll need complete documentation of all Phoenix-related transfers and communications, and I expect your full cooperation with the forensic accountants I'm bringing in. You'll have it, he promised. One more thing, Xavier. The Nexus architecture that saved the project last year. Did Roland tell you that was my work? He had the decency to look ashamed. No. He presented it as his own breakthrough. And you believed that? Despite knowing he hasn't written a line of code in 20 years? Honestly, I assumed it came from Imara's team at Phoenix. Roland had been spending so much time with them. He trailed off, realizing too late the implication of his words. Thank you for your candor. That will be all for now. After Xavier left, I spent the next hour reviewing financial documents, making notes for the board meeting. The scale of Roland's deception was larger than even I had initially realized. Beyond the Phoenix arrangement, there were questionable consulting fees, inflated expenses, and strategic omissions in quarterly reports. He had been bleeding the company slowly, methodically, for years. At precisely 3 p.m., I entered the main boardroom where 12 people sat around a massive oak table. Most were familiar faces, long-standing board members who had watched Blackridge grow from startup to industry leader. A few were newer additions, brought in by Roland during expansions. Vernon Hargrove, our largest institutional investor, stood as I entered. Ladies and gentlemen, as discussed in yesterday's emergency session, I present Octavia Thorne, Blackridge Technologies' new Chief Executive Officer. The reactions ranged from welcoming smiles to barely concealed skepticism. I had anticipated this. Many of these people had only ever known me as Roland's wife, not as a technical founder or business leader. Thank you, Vernon. I took my place at the head of the table. I recognize this transition is unexpected for some of you. Let me assure you that my commitment to Blackridge's success is absolute. It has been since I wrote the first line of code for SecureNet 39 years ago. That statement alone caused several eyebrows to rise. Good. Let them begin to question the narrative they'd accepted all these years. Today's agenda includes a preliminary report on financial irregularities discovered during internal review, a proposed restructuring of our executive team, and our strategic priorities for the coming quarter. Before we begin, are there any questions about yesterday's decision? Marcus Wellington, one of Roland's oldest allies on the board, cleared his throat. With all due respect, Mrs. Blackridge? Ms. Thorne, I corrected. Ms. Thorne, he continued, barely missing a beat. While the board has voted to implement this temporary change in leadership, many of us have concerns about the abruptness of the transition. Roland Blackridge built this company from nothing. His vision and leadership have created billions in shareholder value. I appreciate your concern, Marcus, and I agree completely that Blackridge's success should be attributed to its founder. I smiled. That's precisely why I'm sitting here today. I opened my laptop and projected a series of documents onto the screen at the end of the room. Original, code repositories, early business plans, patent applications with my name systematically removed, and financial transfers to Phoenix Innovations. For those who weren't present yesterday, these documents provide indisputable evidence of two things: my role as co-founder and technical architect of Blackridge's core products, and Roland's systematic misappropriation of company resources through Phoenix Innovations. Marcus's face reddened. This is preposterous. Roland would never— The evidence suggests otherwise, Vernon interrupted. The forensic accounting team has already verified the Phoenix transfers. Nearly $30 million moved through. That entity in the past 2 years alone. Furthermore, I added, Phoenix has been filing patents based on research conducted and paid for by Blackridge. Research that, in many cases, originated with me. For the next hour, I walked the board through the details of my findings. By the time I concluded, even Roland's staunchest allies looked concerned. The financial improprieties alone were sufficient. Grounds for his removal. My technical credentials simply strengthened the case for my appointment. Moving forward, I continued, I propose a 3-month transitional period during which we will conduct a full audit, restructure our executive team, and realign our product strategy to emphasize innovation rather than financial engineering. And Roland's role during this transition? Marcus asked, his earlier defiance notably diminished. Roland remains a significant shareholder, but he will have no operational role at Blackridge. His access to company systems and facilities has been revoked, effective immediately. The remainder of the meeting proceeded with surprising smoothness. By the end, even the initially skeptical board members were engaged with the new direction. I closed with a commitment to transparency and a return to the innovative spirit that had defined Blackridge's early years. As the room cleared, Vernon lingered behind. "That went better than expected," he said quietly. "People respect decisiveness," I replied, "and evidence. Roland called me this morning, you know. Tried to organize an emergency session to reverse yesterday's vote." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "I told him he'd need to address the Phoenix situation first." He hung up. Vernon smiled grimly. "You should prepare yourself, Octavia. He won't go quietly." "I've been married to the man for 40 years, Vernon. I don't expect anything about this to be quiet." I returned to my new office to find Margot waiting with an updated schedule and a concerned expression. "Ms. Chen is here to see you," she said. "She's quite insistent." "I'm sure she is. Send her in." Imara Chen entered like she owned the room, striding confidently in stiletto heels, her tailored red dress a deliberate echo of her outfit from the previous night. At 33, she was everything I had once been: brilliant, ambitious, and completely underestimated by the men around her. "Where is Roland?" she demanded without preamble. "Hello, Imara. I see your illness has miraculously improved." She crossed her arms. "Cut the pleasantries. What happened yesterday? Why was Roland removed? Please, sit down." I gestured to the chair across from me. "This concerns you as well." She remained standing. "I don't have time for games." "This isn't a game. It's an investigation into financial misconduct and intellectual property theft. Specifically, the activities of Phoenix Innovations, a company where you serve as Chief Technology Officer while simultaneously employed by Blackridge." Her composure wavered slightly. "There's no conflict of interest. Roland approved the arrangement." "Roland didn't have the authority to approve that arrangement, particularly not without board disclosure. And the systematic transfer of Blackridge intellectual property to Phoenix constitutes theft, regardless of who authorized it." "That's absurd. Phoenix developed that technology independently." "Did it? Or did you build on research conducted here, paid for by Blackridge? Much of it originated by me?" I opened a folder on my desk. "Your team at Phoenix filed a patent for adaptive encryption protocols last year. The foundational algorithm matches, line for line, a prototype I developed for Blackridge 3 years ago." Imara's confidence fractured. She sank into the chair, her expression calculating. "What do you want?" "Complete transparency. All Phoenix assets returned to Blackridge. Your full cooperation with our investigation." "And if I refuse?" "Then the criminal complaint I've prepared goes to the district attorney this afternoon, naming both you and Roland as defendants." She paled. Visibly. "You wouldn't. It would tank Blackridge's stock. Short-term, perhaps. But unlike Roland, I've always prioritized long-term stability over quarterly returns." I leaned forward. "Imara, you're brilliant. Your work on the Nexus interface was exceptional, but you've hitched your wagon to the wrong horse." "Roland built this company," she insisted, though with less conviction than before. "Roland marketed this company. I built it." I softened my tone. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago. Talented, ambitious, and making compromises you'll regret later. Don't repeat my mistakes." For a moment, I saw uncertainty in her eyes, a genuine flicker of doubt about the narrative Roland had undoubtedly fed her. "I love him," she said finally, as if that explained everything. "I loved him too once. That doesn't justify fraud." She stood abruptly. "I need to speak with Roland." "Of course, but Imara, your keycard access has been suspended and your company devices have been remotely locked. Please don't attempt to remove any files or materials from your office." Her eyes flashed with anger. You can't stop what's coming, Octavia. Roland won't let you take everything he's built. He's welcome to try stopping me, but given his track record of underestimating women, I like my chances. After Amara left, I locked my office door and allowed myself a moment of pure exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried me through the day was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. For decades, I had suppressed my anger, my resentment, my ambition, playing the role of supportive wife while my contributions were systematically erased. No more. I opened my laptop and accessed the secure server where I'd stored my evidence against Roland. There was one file I hadn't shared with the board or Vernon, transcripts of Roland's private communications with Imara, discussing not just their affair, but their long-term plans. Once the Nexus platform launches, he had written 6 months earlier, we'll implement the reorganization, Phoenix will acquire the core security division, and we'll take Blackridge private through a leveraged buyout. Octavia's shares will be diluted in the restructuring. She'll never understand the mechanics until it's too late. The plan would have stripped me of both my ownership stake and any claim to the technologies I had developed. It was breathtakingly ruthless and perfectly aligned with the Roland I had gradually come to recognize beneath the charming facade. My phone chimed with an incoming text. I expected Lyra or Dominic checking in after our brunch, but instead found a message from Roland. We need to talk. Dinner at La Maison, 8 p.m. La Maison was the most exclusive restaurant in Meridian City, a place where privacy was guaranteed and conversations remained confidential. It was also where Roland had taken me to celebrate Blackridge's IPO 15 years earlier. I considered declining, then reconsidered. Whatever Roland planned to propose, it would be valuable to hear it directly. Knowledge was power, and I had surrendered my power for far too long. I'll be there, I replied. I spent the remainder of the afternoon in meetings with Blackridge's legal counsel and security team, implementing the first phase of my transition plan. By 7:30 p.m., I had done everything possible to secure my position and protect the company's assets from whatever countermoves Roland might attempt. As Ellis drove me to La Maison, I gazed out at the city lights reflected in Crescent Lake. Meridian. City had been my home for 4 decades, yet in many ways I was only now beginning to claim my place within it. We've arrived, Ms. Thorne, Ellis announced, pulling up to the restaurant's discreet entrance. Thank you, Ellis. Please wait nearby. I don't anticipate this taking long. The maitre d' escorted me to a private dining room where Roland waited, a bottle of champagne already open on the table. He had changed into a fresh suit, Italian, impeccably tailored, and his hair was freshly trimmed. He rose as I entered, his expression carefully neutral. Octavia, thank you for coming. I took the seat across from him, declining his attempt to help with my chair. Let's skip the pleasantries, Roland. Why am I here? He poured champagne into 2 flutes. To discuss a reasonable resolution to this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. You committed fraud. I discovered it. The board removed you. Those are facts, not interpretations. Facts can be contextual, he countered, pushing a champagne flute toward me. What looks improper from one angle might be innovative strategy from another. I left the champagne untouched. Is that what you're calling the systematic theft of my intellectual property? Innovative strategy? His smile tightened. Your intellectual property? Octavia, everything created during our marriage is community property. Everything developed at Blackridge belongs to the company. Where I remain Chief Technology Officer, regardless of how thoroughly you tried to erase that fact. No one erased anything. You chose to step back from day-to-day operations to focus on our family. That was your decision. The audacity of his revisionist history would have enraged me once. Now it merely confirmed the righteousness of my actions. What do you want, Roland? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to the persuasive murmur he had used for decades to close deals and manage difficult situations. A dignified transition. I return as Chairman Emeritus. You maintain the CEO title. We present a united front to the market while negotiating a fair division of assets in private. And Phoenix Innovations becomes a proper subsidiary of Blackridge, with appropriate compensation for its independent development work. I studied him thoughtfully. In his mind, this was a reasonable compromise, a face-saving measure that would preserve his public reputation while allowing him to salvage some of his schemes. And Imara? His expression hardened. My personal life is not relevant to this discussion. Your personal life became relevant when you announced your affair at our anniversary dinner. Or was that part of your innovative strategy as well? That was poorly timed, he admitted. I apologize for the public nature of the disclosure. But not for the affair itself. He sighed with practiced weariness. Octavia, be realistic. Our marriage has been a business arrangement for years. We both know that. No, Roland, that's what you transformed it into, not what I agreed to. He switched tactics, his voice softening. 40 years together counts for something, doesn't it? Whatever our differences, we built Blackridge as a team. Let's not destroy that legacy with public acrimony. For a moment, I glimpsed the Roland I had fallen in love with all those years ago. Charismatic, visionary, capable of making anyone feel like the center of his universe. But it was only a performance, a calculated appeal to sentiment in service of his objectives. You're right about one thing, I said finally. 40 years does count for something. It counts for 4 decades of systematic erasure, financial exploitation, and breathtaking disrespect. I pushed back from the table and stood. There will be no dignified transition, Roland. No emeritus position, no united front. You're out, and I'm in. The company will move forward under my leadership, and your legacy will be whatever you can salvage from the wreckage of your choices. His facade cracked, revealing the anger beneath. You think you can run Blackridge without me? The market will punish you. Clients trust my relationships, not yours. Perhaps, but they'll trust the technology more, especially when they learn who actually created it. This isn't over, he warned, rising to face me. I still own 28% of Blackridge. 23%, I corrected again, and diminishing daily as the evidence of your malfeasance mounts. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. We could have had everything, Octavia. If you'd just played your role, we would both have won. I looked back at him one last time. This man I had loved and supported for 4 decades, now revealed as a stranger. That's the difference between us, Roland. I never saw our marriage or our company as a game to be won. I saw it as a partnership to be honored. As I walked out of La Maison, I felt an unexpected lightness. Roland would fight, of course. He would use every resource, every connection, every manipulation in his considerable arsenal. But for the first time in 40 years, I was facing him as an equal. Not as the silent partner he had relegated to the shadows, but as the technical genius and business leader I had always been. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, and that, after decades of compromise, was victory enough. The first week of my tenure as CEO unfolded with the frenetic intensity of a startup launch. I arrived at the office each morning before sunrise and left well after the cleaning crew had finished their rounds. The magnitude of Roland's deception became clearer with each passing day as our forensic accountants uncovered layer upon layer of financial manipulation. Beyond the Phoenix Innovation scheme, Roland had created a labyrinth of shell companies, consulting agreements, and offshore accounts designed to siphon Blackridge resources while maintaining plausible deniability. The complexity suggested long-term planning and a flagrant disregard for his fiduciary responsibilities. On Thursday morning, Josephine Barrett, my corporate attorney, requested an urgent meeting. She arrived carrying a sealed manila envelope, her expression unusually grave. "The Phoenix servers have been wiped," she announced without preamble. "Sometime between midnight and 4 a.m. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. They targeted specific repositories containing proprietary code and left everything else intact to delay discovery." I set down my coffee slowly. "Can we recover the data?" "Our tech team is working on it, but preliminary assessment isn't promising." The deletions were methodical and followed by multiple overwrite passes. "Roland," I said, the name itself now tasting bitter on my tongue. "Almost. Certainly. Or someone acting on his instructions. We've already notified law enforcement and secured an emergency injunction freezing all Phoenix assets." Josephine hesitated, then added, "There's more. We've identified unusual trading patterns in Blackridge stock over the past 3 days. Someone's accumulating shares through multiple smaller investment vehicles." "Roland again?" "Possibly, though the pattern suggests institutional backing. The volumes are significant, nearly 3% of outstanding shares." I calculated quickly. Combined with his existing stake, that would put him dangerously close to a controlling interest. "Exactly. I've alerted the SEC, but they move slowly. In the meantime, we need to consider a poison pill to prevent a hostile takeover. Draft the proposal. I'll call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." After Josephine left, I sat at my desk, staring at the city skyline beyond my window. Roland's counterattack was more aggressive than I had anticipated. He wasn't just fighting to save face or retrieve his position. He was attempting to seize control of the company, by any means necessary. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Thorne? Xavier Thornfield is here. He says it's urgent." "Send him in." Xavier entered looking distinctly uncomfortable, a manila folder clutched tightly in his hands. "I found something you need to see." He placed the folder on my desk and opened it to reveal printouts of emails and technical specifications. These are from 3 years ago, when Roland first established Phoenix. I was cleaning out some old files and found hard copies I'd kept as insurance. I glanced through the documents, my pulse quickening. These show direct transfers of Blackridge proprietary code to Phoenix servers. Yes, and this, he pointed to a specific email, is Roland instructing the development team to create a backdoor in our security systems, accessible only through Phoenix authentication. "A backdoor," I repeated, the implications crystallizing. "That would explain how the servers were wiped last night. They never needed to breach our security because the access was built in." Xavier nodded grimly. The backdoor was disguised as a legitimate administrative function. I raised concerns when I discovered it, but Roland insisted it was necessary for emergency system access. "Why are you showing me this now, Xavier? You've had these documents for years." He met my gaze directly for perhaps the first time since I'd known him. "Because I was wrong. I compromised my professional ethics to protect my position, and in doing so became complicit in Roland's schemes. I can't undo that, but I can help make it right." I studied him thoughtfully. People were rarely purely villains or heroes. Most existed in the gray space between, making flawed choices for complex reasons. Xavier had benefited from Roland's favoritism, certainly, but he hadn't architected the deception. "Thank you for your honesty. I'll need your help closing this backdoor immediately and assessing what other vulnerabilities might exist." "Of course. I've already assembled a security team. We'll work through the night if necessary." As Xavier turned to leave, I added, "And Xavier, your position at Blackridge is secure, provided this level of transparency continues." Relief flooded his features. "Thank you, Octavia. It will." The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of meetings, security briefings, legal consultations, and preparation for the emergency board session. By evening, we had secured our most critical systems and begun the process of rebuilding what had been lost in the Phoenix server wipe. As darkness fell over Meridian City, I sat alone in my office, reviewing the proposed poison pill strategy Josephine had drafted. The legal mechanism would effectively prevent Roland from acquiring a controlling interest by making additional share purchases prohibitively expensive. My phone chimed with an incoming message, not from my children or my legal team, but from Imara Chen. "We need to talk, not at the office. The Onyx Lounge, 9 p.m. tonight. Come alone." I considered ignoring the message. Imara had made her allegiance to Roland abundantly clear, and meeting her away from the protection of Blackridge security presented obvious risks. Yet curiosity won out. What could she possibly want to discuss that couldn't be said at the office? I texted Ellis to bring the car around, then notified Josephine of my plans. "Have security track my phone location," I added as a precaution. "If I don't check in by 10 p.m., contact me immediately." The Onyx Lounge occupied the 13th floor of the Obsidian Hotel, offering panoramic views of Crescent Lake and the city beyond. The space was deliberately intimate, low lighting, plush seating arranged in discrete clusters, and ambient music just loud enough to ensure privacy without hindering conversation. Imara waited at a corner table, nursing a glass of red wine. She wore a simple black dress rather than her usual power suits, her usual confident demeanor subdued. She didn't rise as I approached, merely gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice curiously flat. "You said we needed to talk." I signaled a server and ordered sparkling water. "I'm listening." Imara took a long sip of her wine before responding. "I'm leaving Roland." Of all the things I had expected her to say, this ranked near the bottom. "And you felt I needed this information because I'm also leaving Phoenix Innovations, effective immediately." My guard remained firmly in place. "Again, why tell me this?" "Because I have information about what Roland is planning, and because—" She hesitated, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. "I need to make things right." The server returned with my water. I waited until he had retreated before responding. "What exactly are you offering, Imara?" "Everything. Access to the Phoenix backup servers that weren't affected by the wipe. Documentation of all transferred intellectual property. Evidence of Roland's communications with institutional investors who are helping him accumulate Blackridge shares." "Why would you betray him now, after everything you've invested in your relationship?" Imara's composure cracked, just slightly. "Because yesterday, I found out I wasn't the first, or even the second. There have been others, all young, ambitious women he mentored professionally while pursuing personally. He discarded each one when they became inconvenient or stopped being useful." "And you believe you're different?" "I thought I was." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what he told me when we started seeing each other? That you two had a marriage of convenience. That you had grown apart decades ago but stayed together for appearances. That you had your own separate life and relationships." I couldn't help but laugh at the audacity of Roland's lies. "While I was raising our children and supporting his career, he told you I was living some secret separate life?" "I believed him because I wanted to," she admitted. "It was easier than acknowledging I was helping destroy a 40-year marriage." "What changed?" Imara reached into her purse and removed a folded document, sliding it across the table. "Last week, after your confrontation in your office, I went to Roland for reassurance. He was agitated, drinking heavily. He left his phone unlocked when he went to shower. I unfolded the paper to find printouts of text messages between Roland and someone named Elise. His new assistant," Imara explained, her voice tight with controlled emotion. 26 years old. He's been seeing her for 3 months, even while planning our engagement announcement. The messages were explicitly romantic, interspersed with discussions of Imara's eventual role at Phoenix once the Blackridge situation was resolved. Roland described her as temporary but useful, given her technical skills and board connections. I felt a surprising wave of compassion for the woman across from me. Imara had been both accomplice and victim in Roland's machinations, manipulated by the same man who had spent decades doing the same to me, albeit in different ways. These messages are illuminating, but hardly actionable from a business perspective, I said, carefully neutral. They're just to establish my credibility. The real evidence is here. She produced a small flash drive. Complete backups of the Phoenix servers, including the original Blackridge code with my modifications. Emails between Roland and the investment consortium he's assembled for the takeover attempt. And recordings of conversations where he explicitly discussed using the backdoor to compromise Blackridge systems. I made no move to take the drive. Why didn't you bring this to the authorities? Because I'm implicated in everything on that drive. Using it means incriminating myself. She met my gaze steadily. I'm willing to face those consequences, but I want assurances that my cooperation will be considered during any legal proceedings. I can't make promises on behalf of prosecutors, Imara. No, but your recommendation would carry significant weight. She pushed the drive closer to me. I'm not asking for immunity, just recognition that I'm trying to make this right. I studied her for a long moment, assessing her sincerity. The Imara Chen sitting before me was different from the confident, almost arrogant woman who had confronted me in my office days earlier. This version seemed genuine in her regret, or at least in her anger at Roland's betrayal. If this information proves legitimate and valuable, I will acknowledge your cooperation to the relevant authorities, I said finally, taking the drive. But I make no guarantees beyond that. That's fair. She drained the last of her wine. There's one more thing. You should know. Roland is meeting with the investment consortium tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., the Harrington Club, private dining room. They're finalizing the details of the takeover attempt. How convenient that you're sharing this information the night before. She shrugged, a ghost of her former confidence returning. I needed to be certain of my decision, and I needed insurance against Roland discovering my intentions prematurely. What will you do now? Leave Meridian City, start over somewhere new. A bitter smile played at her lips. Perhaps create something of my own for a change, rather than helping men take credit for women's work. As I stood to leave, Imara added, He never appreciated what he had in you, Octavia. Not as a wife, and certainly not as a brilliant mind. That was his greatest mistake. No, I replied quietly. His greatest mistake was believing that I would continue accepting his deception indefinitely. We all have breaking points, Imara. You've found yours. I found mine. Outside the Onyx Lounge, I immediately called Josephine, updating her on Imara's information and requesting a security team to verify the contents of the flash drive before we accessed it on Blackridge systems. If it's legitimate, Josephine said, this could be the turning point. With evidence of Roland using the back door to damage company property, we have grounds for criminal charges, not just civil action. Have the team work through the night. If the information about tomorrow's meeting is accurate, we need to be prepared to act immediately. Back at the Aurelian Heights estate, I found Roland waiting in the foyer, his presence so unexpected I momentarily froze in the doorway. Breaking and entering is a crime, Roland, I said calmly, though my pulse had quickened. I had the locks changed days ago. It's still legally my residence, he replied, his tone deceptively casual. And I had keys made years ago that you knew nothing about. One of many precautions I took. He looked disheveled by his standards, his normally impeccable suit slightly rumpled, his eyes shadowed by fatigue or stress. A half-empty tumbler of whiskey sat on the console table beside him. What do you want? I've made my position clear. You've made your position untenable, he countered, taking a step toward me. Your little coup may have impressed the board temporarily, but it won't last. By this time tomorrow, The balance of power will have shifted dramatically. You mean your meeting at the Harrington Club? With the investment consortium? I had the satisfaction of seeing genuine surprise flicker across his face. Did you really think I wouldn't know about your plans, Roland? He recovered quickly, his expression hardening. Whatever you think you know, you're already too late. The arrangements are finalized. The shares have been acquired through vehicles even your forensic accountants haven't identified. By noon tomorrow, I'll control Blackridge once again. And then what? You'll reinstall yourself as CEO? Pretend none of this happened? No, he said, his voice dropping dangerously. Then I'll dismantle everything you've built over the past week. Every appointment, every decision, every assertion of authority, all of it wiped away. The board members who supported you will be removed. The employees who allied with you will be terminated. And me? Will you have me removed as well? His smile was cold, calculating. You'll be offered a dignified exit, a generous settlement in exchange for your silence and your shares. The alternative would be less pleasant. Is that a threat, Roland? A reality check. You've had your moment of rebellion, Octavia. It was impressive, truly. But it's time to accept that you've lost. He moved closer, his height allowing him to loom over me in a way he knew I found intimidating. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to negotiate terms now. Just the two of us. I stood my ground, refusing to be backed against the wall as I had so many times throughout our marriage. I have nothing to negotiate, and you have nothing to offer that I would accept. Don't be foolish. I'm offering you a comfortable retirement, financial security, and most importantly, protection from public humiliation when all of this unravels. Protection from public humiliation, I repeated with a bitter laugh. The way you protected me when you announced your engagement to Amara at our anniversary dinner? His expression darkened. That was regrettable timing, but irrelevant to our current situation. Nothing about our marriage has been irrelevant to our current situation, Roland. Every lie, every manipulation, every erasure of my contributions led directly to this moment. Such drama, he scoffed. I gave you a beautiful home, financial security, social standing, everything a woman of your generation could want. What more did you expect? Recognition, respect, basic human decency. I moved toward the security panel near the door. Now, I'm going to ask you once to leave voluntarily. After that, I'll activate the security system and the private security. Team I hired will remove you forcibly. Roland's face flushed with anger. This isn't over, Octavia. Not by a long shot. Tomorrow will take care of itself, I interrupted. Tonight you're trespassing in my home. For a tense moment, I thought he might refuse to leave, or even become physically aggressive. Instead, he drained his whiskey in a single swallow and set the glass down with deliberate care. Enjoy your brief moment of authority, he said quietly. By this time tomorrow, you'll be back exactly where you belong, in my shadow. After he left, I double-checked all doors and windows before activating the enhanced security system I'd had installed days earlier. Despite my outward composure, during our confrontation, my hands trembled slightly as I poured myself a small measure of brandy. Roland's confidence was unsettling. Either he genuinely believed his takeover plan was foolproof, or he was bluffing to undermine my resolve. Neither possibility was comforting. I called Josephine to update her on Roland's unexpected visit. He all but confirmed the meeting tomorrow. I want our team in place well before 7 a.m. Already arranged, she assured me. And there's good news. The flash drive from Amara checked out. No malware, and the contents appear to be exactly what she claimed. We're already analyzing the data. Excellent. Anything actionable for tomorrow's confrontation? Absolutely. We've identified all 7 members of the investment consortium and documented their communications with Roland. The Securities and Exchange Commission has agreed to send representatives to the meeting based on evidence of potential securities fraud. And the backdoor exploit? Confirmed. We have clear evidence of Roland's direct involvement in the server wipe. The district attorney is preparing charges as we speak. Relief washed over me. So we're ready. More than ready, Josephine replied, a note of satisfaction in her voice. Roland has no idea what's coming. After ending the call, I spent several hours reviewing the material from Imara's flash drive, forwarded securely by our IT team. The evidence was even more damning than I had anticipated. Roland hadn't just crossed ethical lines. He had deliberately, systematically violated corporate law, securities regulations, and possibly committed computer fraud. It was nearly 2 a.m. when my phone chimed with an incoming text from Lyra. "Are you awake? Can I call?" Seconds later, my phone rang. Lyra's voice came through tense and frustrated. "Dad just called me. He's trying to convince Dominic and me to side with him publicly against you. Says you've had some kind of breakdown and are destroying his life's work. I suspected he might try to involve you two eventually. What did you tell him?" "That he could go to hell," she replied bluntly. "After what he did at the anniversary dinner? But Mom, he's escalating. He mentioned something about a board vote tomorrow that would resolve the situation once and for all." "He's planning a takeover attempt," I confirmed, "but we're prepared for it." "Do you need us there? For moral support or as character? Witnesses or something?" I smiled at her protective instinct. "No, sweetheart. This is a legal and corporate matter now, not a family dispute. The best thing you and Dominic can do is stay completely clear of it." "Are you sure?" "Because we're both ready to testify about what an incredible technical mind you have. All those programming lessons you gave us as kids, the projects you worked on from home, we saw your brilliance even when Dad was taking credit for it." My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary. We have more than enough evidence." "But Lyra? It means everything that you see me. That you always saw me, even when I was hiding in plain sight." After our call ended, I tried to get a few hours of sleep, but rest proved elusive. Instead, I found myself in my home office, reviewing technical specifications for Blackridge's next-generation security platform, work that had always brought me comfort and clarity, even in the most turbulent times. As dawn broke over Crescent Lake, I showered and dressed with particular care, choosing a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without ostentation. My mother's sapphire pendant, a gift from my father to celebrate her doctorate in Dao mathematics, completed the ensemble. A reminder of the brilliant, determined woman who had encouraged me to pursue technology when few women dared enter the field. Ellis arrived precisely at 6 a.m. to drive me to the Harrington Club. Located in Meridian City's historic financial district, the club had served as a gathering place for the city's business elite for over a century. Its wood-paneled rooms and strict privacy policies made it an ideal location for confidential negotiations, or conspiracies. Josephine waited for me at the service entrance, accompanied by 2 SEC investigators and a representative from the district attorney's office. "Everything is in place," she confirmed quietly. "The investment consortium arrived 15 minutes ago. Roland just went in." "And our legal position?" "Rock solid. The evidence from Imara's flash drive, combined with the forensic accounting report, gives us grounds for both civil and criminal action. The SEC is particularly interested in the share manipulation scheme." I checked my watch, 6:45 a.m. Let's give them time to get comfortable before we interrupt. At precisely 7:10 a.m., we entered the private dining room of the Harrington Club. The scene before us was exactly as expected. Roland at the head of the table, surrounded by 7 men in expensive suits, the investment consortium that had agreed to help him seize control of Blackridge. The conversation halted abruptly as we entered. Roland's expression shifted from shock to fury in an instant. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, half rising from his chair. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said calmly. "I apologize for interrupting, but this meeting concerns Blackridge Technologies, where I serve as Chief Executive Officer. It seemed appropriate that I attend." The SEC investigator stepped forward, presenting his credentials. "I'm Agent Carlisle with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We're here investigating potential securities fraud, specifically related to undisclosed share acquisitions and market manipulation." Panic flashed across several faces around the table. One of the investors, Darius Merritt, CEO of Pinnacle Capital, immediately stood. "I was invited to discuss a potential investment opportunity. I had no knowledge of any improper activity." "Sit down, Darius," Roland snapped. "This is a fishing expedition with no legal basis. They have nothing." "Actually," Josephine interjected, opening her briefcase to remove a stack of documents, "we have quite a lot. Communications between Mr. Blackridge and each of you, detailing a coordinated effort to acquire Blackridge shares through shell companies to circumvent disclosure requirements. Evidence of Mr. Blackridge providing material non-public information to influence your investment decisions, and documentation of promised board positions and preferential treatment once control was secured." The representative from the district attorney's office stepped forward next. "Additionally, we have evidence of computer fraud, specifically unauthorized access to Blackridge servers resulting in data destruction. This morning, we executed a search warrant at Phoenix Innovations headquarters, where we expect to find further confirmation of these activities." Roland's composure cracked entirely. "This is absurd. A witch hunt orchestrated by a vindictive woman who couldn't accept that our marriage had run its course." I remained perfectly calm, my voice steady. "This has nothing to do with our marriage, Roland. This is about your systematic betrayal of your fiduciary duties, your fraudulent business practices, and your willingness to damage the company you claim to care about, all to maintain control you no longer deserve." One by one, the investors began distancing themselves, making calls to their attorneys, or simply leaving the room altogether. Roland watched his carefully constructed alliance disintegrate before his eyes, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief to something approaching desperation. "You can't do this," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Everything I did was for Blackridge's benefit." "No, Roland. Everything you did was for your own benefit. Blackridge was simply the vehicle for your ambition and ego." I gestured to the SEC investigators who had begun collecting documents and electronic devices from the remaining participants. "This meeting is concluded, gentlemen. I suggest full cooperation with the authorities." As the room cleared, Roland and I found ourselves momentarily alone, a final private moment in a relationship that had spanned 4 decades. "Why couldn't you just accept your role?" he asked, sounding genuinely bewildered. "We had a good life. Everything was working perfectly until you decided to assert yourself." "That's the problem, Roland. It was working perfectly for you, not for me." I studied the man I had once loved with my whole heart, now revealed as fundamentally incapable of seeing me as an equal. "Did you ever really see me? Not as a reflection of yourself or a tool for your ambition, but as a person in my own right?" He had no answer. Perhaps there was none to give. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the doorway. "Octavia." His tone had shifted, softening with what might have been genuine emotion. 40 years counts for something. Please, don't let it end like this." For a heartbeat, I wavered. 4 decades of shared history, 2 children, countless memories. All of it hung in the balance against his betrayal and manipulation. "You're right," I said finally. 40 years does count for something. It counts for 40 years too long. I met his gaze one last time. "Goodbye, Roland. As I walked out of the Harrington Club into the bright morning sunshine, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. The battle wasn't over. There would be legal proceedings, corporate restructuring, and undoubtedly more attempts by Roland to salvage his position and reputation. But the turning point had been reached. The truth had been exposed. And after 40 years of living in Roland's shadow, I had finally emerged into the light of my own making. The aftermath of the Harrington Club confrontation unfolded with startling swiftness. By noon, news of Roland's attempted takeover and subsequent investigation had reached major financial outlets. Blackridge's stock initially plummeted 15% before stabilizing as my communications team released a carefully worded statement outlining the situation and our plans moving forward. The board convened an emergency session that afternoon, unanimously reaffirming my position as CEO and implementing the poison pill strategy to prevent any future takeover attempts. Several of Roland's closest allies on the board submitted their resignations, recognizing their positions had become untenable. "The company will weather this," Vernon assured me after the session concluded. "The fundamentals remain strong, and the market respects decisive action in the face of malfeasance." I appreciated his confidence, but harbored no illusions about the challenges ahead. Corporate scandals cast long shadows, particularly in the technology sector where trust and reputation were paramount. The coming weeks would test Blackridge's resilience, and mine, in ways I could scarcely imagine. 3 days after the confrontation, Roland was formally charged with securities fraud, computer crimes, and wire fraud. The court set his bail at $5 million, which he posted immediately. His mugshot, hair disheveled, expression defiant, appeared on financial news sites alongside headlines recounting his fall from grace. Watching this unfold from my office, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound weariness and an unexpected touch of sorrow for what might have been had Roland chosen a different path. 40 years of shared history couldn't be erased by recent revelations, no matter how damning. My reverie was interrupted by Margot announcing Dominic's arrival. My son entered with his characteristic energy, though concern shadowed his features. "Mom, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you for 2 days." "I'm fine," I assured him. "Just incredibly busy. The transition team is working around the clock to stabilize operations." Dominic dropped into the chair across from my desk, studying me with the perceptive gaze he'd inherited from me. "You look exhausted. When was the last time you slept properly?" "Sleep is a luxury I can't afford at the moment." I gestured to the stacks of reports covering my desk. "Every aspect of the company needs review. Roland's influence was pervasive. That's precisely why you need rest. You can't single-handedly rebuild what took 40 years to construct." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Let the executive team handle some of this. That's what they're paid for." I sighed, recognizing the wisdom in his words. The tendency to micromanage, to personally oversee every detail, was a habit, formed through decades of working behind the scenes, ensuring that everything functioned perfectly while Roland claimed the credit. "You're right," I conceded. "I've scheduled a meeting with the executive committee tomorrow to delegate responsibilities more effectively." "Good." Dominic's expression shifted, growing more hesitant. "There's something else. Dad called me this morning." My stomach tightened. What did he want? To apologize, strangely enough. He sounded different, subdued. Dominic shrugged uncomfortably. "He asked me to tell you he wants to meet, to discuss a settlement without dragging things through the courts. His attorneys have already approached Josephine with similar overtures. I'm considering it." I tapped my pen against the desk, weighing my words. "Dominic, regardless of what happens legally, your relationship with your father is separate from all of this. You don't need to choose sides." "Don't I?" A flash of anger crossed his features. "He betrayed you, the company, and our family. How am I supposed to look past that?" With time and perspective, I said gently. Roland made terrible choices, but he's still your father. The man who taught you to sail on Crescent Lake, who stayed up all night helping you build models for science fairs, who celebrated every achievement of yours with genuine pride. And who announced his engagement to another woman at your anniversary. Dinner? Dominic countered bitterly. Yes, all of those things can be true simultaneously. People are complicated, Dominic. Even the ones who hurt us most. He studied me curiously. How can you be so measured about this? If I were in your position, I'd want to burn everything to the ground. A smile touched my lips. Perhaps I did, initially. But revenge is ultimately unsatisfying. Justice, on the other hand, making things right, restoring balance, that has lasting value. Mom the philosopher, he said with a hint of his usual humor. Next you'll be telling me to forgive and forget. Not at all. Forgiveness is a personal choice, not an obligation, and forgetting would be foolish. I reached across the desk to squeeze his hand. I'm simply suggesting that you leave room for complexity in how you view your father. For your own sake, not his. After Dominic left, I continued working until, well past midnight, finalizing preparation for the next day's executive committee meeting. The forensic accounting team had completed their preliminary assessment, revealing the full extent of Roland's financial manipulations. While legally actionable, pursuing criminal charges would inevitably damage Blackridge's market position and public standing. Balancing justice against pragmatism had never been more challenging. Every option carried significant costs, both personal and professional. I finally returned to the Aurelian Heights estate shortly after 1 a.m., my security detail, trailing discreetly behind. The house felt cavernous and empty, a museum of a life I had outgrown. I resolved to begin looking for a new residence, something that reflected my own taste rather than the opulent showcase Roland had insisted upon. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Check your email. I see, Imara Chen. I hadn't heard from her since our meeting at the Onyx Lounge. I opened my laptop to find a message with a video attachment. The brief text read, "Thought you should see this before making any decisions about settlements. Recorded 6 months ago during strategy discussions for Phoenix." The video showed Roland in a conference room with several men I recognized as Phoenix investors. Imara was visible at the edge of the frame, taking notes on a tablet. Once the acquisition is complete, Roland was saying, we'll implement a comprehensive restructuring. The Blackridge brand will be maintained for customer continuity, but all significant intellectual property will be transferred to Phoenix control. And your wife's ownership stake? One of the investors asked. Roland's smile was cold. Octavia's technical expertise is decades out of date. She'll be offered an emeritus position with no operational authority, a graceful exit that preserves appearances while removing any obstacles to our strategy. She might not accept that arrangement, another man observed. She will, Roland replied with absolute confidence. Octavia has spent 40 years accepting whatever role I've assigned her. That's not going to change now. The video continued for several more minutes, detailing plans to systematically dismantle the company I had helped build and redirect its assets to benefit Roland and his investors. The casual arrogance with which they discussed erasing my contributions and manipulating my ownership stake was breathtaking. I closed the laptop, my decision crystallized. There would be no quiet settlement, no discreet resolution that allowed Roland to salvage his reputation. The truth, all of it, needed to be exposed, regardless of the temporary damage to Blackridge's market position. The following morning, I arrived at Blackridge headquarters early to prepare for the executive committee meeting. Margot intercepted me as I stepped off the elevator, her expression concerned. Ms. Thorne, Mr. Blackridge is in reception. He's demanding to see you. I hesitated, weighing the wisdom of confronting Roland without Josephine present. How long has he been waiting? About 20 minutes. Security notified me immediately, but I thought you should make the decision about whether to see him. Thank you, Margot. I'll speak with him briefly in the small conference room. Please alert security to stand by and inform Josephine when she arrives. Roland looked markedly different from the confident, commanding presence he had projected throughout our marriage. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and deep lines etched his face, suggesting sleepless nights and mounting pressure. Octavia. He rose as I entered, his voice unexpectedly subdued. Thank you for seeing me. Make it quick, Roland. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, just 5 minutes of your time. I remained standing. Say what you came to say. I've been thinking about our last conversation at the Harrington Club, your question about whether I ever really saw you. He ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture of agitation I'd witnessed countless times over our decades together. The truth is, I did see you. Your brilliance, your contribution, your value to everything we built together. I saw it all. And systematically erased it from the public record, I noted coolly. Yes. The admission seemed to cost him something. Because acknowledging your role would have diminished mine, at least in my mind. My ego couldn't tolerate sharing the spotlight. Why are you telling me this now, Roland? To ease your conscience? Before trial? Because despite everything, 40 years together should end with truth, not lies. He finally met my gaze directly. I've instructed my attorneys to withdraw all opposition to your claims. I'm prepared to sign over my remaining Blackridge shares and plead guilty to the charges. My surprise must have shown on my face because he continued with growing urgency. In exchange, I'm asking for one consideration, not for myself, but for Lyra and Dominic. A public statement from Blackridge indicating that the investigation revealed no compromise of client data or system security. Is that true? Yes. The Phoenix backdoor was never used to access client systems, only to transfer proprietary code and, later, wipe evidence. Our children's professional reputations shouldn't suffer because of my actions. I considered his proposal carefully. The requested statement would be factually accurate while potentially mitigating some of the market damage from the scandal. It wasn't amnesty or exoneration, merely a clarification that would protect innocent parties. I'll discuss it with legal counsel and the board, I said finally. If your confession is comprehensive and your cooperation complete, I see no reason why we couldn't issue such a statement. Relief washed over his features. Thank you, Octavia. As he stood to leave, I added, Why the change of heart, Roland? The last time we spoke, you were still fighting to maintain control. He paused at the door, his shoulders slumping slightly. Imara sent me the Phoenix conference video last night, along with a message that she'd forwarded it to prosecutors. There's no plausible defense against my own recorded words. So this isn't about conscience at all. It's about damage control. Perhaps initially, he admitted, but facing the inevitable has a way of inspiring reflection. I've had to acknowledge some uncomfortable truths about myself and the man I've become. He glanced back at me, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. For what it's worth, I am sorry, Octavia. Not just for getting caught, but for the decades of disrespect and erasure. You deserved better. After Roland left, I sat alone in the conference room, processing this unexpected development. His apology, however belated and self-serving, represented the first genuine acknowledgement of my value in 40 years of partnership. The irony was palpable. It had taken complete professional devastation for Roland to finally see me clearly. The executive committee meeting proceeded as scheduled, with each department head providing updates on their areas of responsibility. The mood was somber but determined as we discussed strategies for rebuilding trust with investors, clients, and the public. The next quarter will be challenging, our CFO acknowledged, but the fundamentals remain strong. Our client retention is holding steady at 93%, and the Nexus platform continues to outperform competitors in benchmark tests. What about the Phoenix intellectual property? Xavier asked. With the servers compromised, how much of that work have we lost permanently? Less than initially feared, I replied. Thanks to Imara Chen's cooperation, we've recovered approximately 80% of the affected code. Our development team is already working to reintegrate it into Blackridge systems. Speaking of Imara, our chief legal officer interjected, prosecutors have offered her a cooperation agreement in exchange for reduced charges. Her testimony will be crucial in the case against Roland. I nodded, unsurprised. She's made amends as best she could. Whether that's sufficient is for the courts to decide, not us. The meeting continued for another hour as we finalized plans for the coming weeks, restructuring the executive team, enhancing security protocols, and developing a transparent communication strategy for investors and clients. As the team dispersed, Vernon remained behind, his expression thoughtful. Roland came to see you this morning. News travels fast. In a company recovering from betrayal, people notice everything. He studied me carefully. What did he want? I summarized Roland's proposal, including his offer to plead guilty and transfer his remaining shares. And you believe him? Vernon's skepticism was evident. I believe he's recognized the futility of fighting. Whether that constitutes genuine remorse is debatable. People like Roland rarely change fundamentally, Octavia. They simply adapt their tactics to new circumstances. Perhaps, I conceded. But his proposal benefits Blackridge regardless of his motivation. A prolonged legal battle would only extend the market uncertainty. Vernon nodded slowly. There's wisdom in that approach. The sooner we can put this chapter behind us, the better for everyone involved. He rose to leave, then added, just be careful. Even wounded, Roland is dangerous. The warning was unnecessary. No one understood Roland's capacity for deception better than I did. Yet something in our brief interaction that morning suggested a genuine reckoning, however self-serving it might be. That evening, I finally began the process of reclaiming my personal life, starting with the Aurelian Heights estate. I hired an interior designer specializing in contemporary minimalism, seeking to transform the ostentatious space into something reflecting my own aesthetic. The bones of the house are magnificent, Elise Kojima observed as she toured the main floor. But the current design feels performative rather than personal, like a stage set rather than a home. Exactly, I agreed, relieved by her immediate understanding. It was designed to project a certain image of success, not to be comfortable or functional. And what would you like it to project now? I considered the question carefully. Authenticity, intellectual curiosity, a sense of peace. She smiled, jotting notes in her portfolio. I can work with that. Any specific requirements for your home office? I assume that's a priority space. Absolutely. Natural light, comfortable seating for long work sessions, and plenty of bookshelves. I have technical texts in storage that haven't seen daylight in years. As we continued through the house, I found myself experiencing a curious lightness. Each decision to alter Roland's carefully curated showcase felt like reclaiming another small piece of myself. Later that night, as I reviewed preliminary design concepts in my temporary home office, Lyra called. I just heard about Dad's plea deal. Are you okay with this outcome? I suggested it myself, actually. A trial would only prolong the damage to Blackridge. But what about justice? After everything he did to you, to the company, he gets to avoid a public reckoning. The plea includes full admission of guilt, disgorgement of all ill-gotten gains, and significant financial penalties. That's sufficient justice for me. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Lyra, I spent 40 years living with anger I didn't even recognize. I'm not interested in carrying that weight any longer. "You're being remarkably generous," she observed, her tone suggesting she wasn't sure whether to admire or question. My decision. Not generous, practical. Energy directed toward revenge is energy diverted from rebuilding. Blackridge needs the latter more than the former right now. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics: Lyra's recent promotion, her plans to visit the following weekend, her tentative steps toward reconciliation with her father. Like Dominic, she was navigating the complex emotional terrain of maintaining a relationship with Roland while acknowledging his profound betrayal. The weeks that followed brought gradual stabilization. Roland's public guilty plea and comprehensive statement of responsibility helped calm investor concerns. The market responded positively to our transparency regarding the scandal and our concrete plans for preventing similar issues in the future. Blackridge stock, which had fallen nearly 20% during the crisis, recovered half those losses within a month. Client retention remained strong, bolstered by personal reassurances from me and enhanced security protocols implemented by Xavier's team. The board approved a significant restructuring, elevating several promising mid-level executives to leadership positions while creating a more distributed decision-making model. The changes were designed to prevent the concentration of power that had enabled Roland's malfeasance while fostering innovation throughout the organization. Personally, I found a new rhythm in my role as CEO. The initial 80-hour weeks gradually moderated to a more sustainable pace as I learned to delegate effectively and trust my leadership team. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to enjoy the creative aspects of technology again, spending several hours each week in our research lab, collaborating with developers on next-generation security protocols. 3 months after the confrontation at the Harrington Club, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at the Meridian City Women in Technology Summit. The event, which annually featured the most influential women in the tech sector, had never extended an invitation to me during Roland's tenure at Blackridge. They specifically requested that you discuss your technical contributions to Blackridge's foundational products, Margot noted as she presented the invitation. The organizer mentioned that your story has inspired renewed interest in recognizing women's often hidden roles in technology development. I accepted immediately, recognizing the opportunity to reshape not just my own narrative, but potentially influence the broader industry conversation around credit and recognition. The morning of the summit dawned clear and bright, a perfect autumn day in Meridian City. I had chosen to hold the event at the Blackridge campus, rather than a hotel or convention center, symbolically opening our doors to the broader technology community. As I reviewed my presentation notes over coffee, Dominic arrived unexpectedly, dressed in a suit I'd never seen before. "Don't you look handsome?" I observed. "Special occasion?" "I'm introducing you at the summit," he replied with a grin. "Didn't Margot tell you?" "She most certainly did not." I made a mental note to thank my assistant for the thoughtful surprise. The organizers asked Lyra and me last week. She had a conflict with a client presentation in Geneva, so I get the honor. Solo. His expression softened. "I've been working on my remarks for days. It's surprisingly difficult to encapsulate your achievements in a 5-minute introduction." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "For 40 years, no one properly introduced you or acknowledged your contributions. That changes today." The summit's main session was held in Blackridge's central atrium, an architectural marvel of glass and sustainable materials that I had designed during our headquarters expansion 10 years earlier. Nearly 500 women, and a smaller contingent of supportive men, filled the space, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and possibility. I watched from backstage as various speakers addressed topics ranging from artificial intelligence ethics to venture capital disparities. The caliber of talent and expertise was extraordinary, a testament to how far the industry had evolved since my early days as one of the few women in technology. Finally, the moderator announced, Our keynote speaker needs little introduction, but deserves a proper one nonetheless. To provide that, please welcome Dominic Blackridge, founder of Prism Digital Solutions. Dominic approached the podium with confident strides, smiling warmly at the audience. Growing up as the son of Roland Blackridge, I became accustomed to hearing about my father's technological brilliance and business acumen, he began. Industry publications called him visionary, revolutionary, unprecedented. What none of them knew, what few people outside our home ever suspected, was that many of the innovations attributed to him actually originated with my mother, Octavia Thorne. A murmur rippled through the audience. When I was 12, I struggled with an advanced programming assignment for a summer technology camp. My father suggested simplifying the project, perhaps choosing something less ambitious. My mother, however, sat with me for hours, patiently explaining recursive algorithms and elegant coding solutions that weren't taught in the course materials. Dominic's voice grew more passionate as he continued. That night, I asked her how she knew so much about programming when her official role at Blackridge was limited to community relations and hospitality. She smiled and said, "Some people create in the spotlight, others in the shadows. The code doesn't care who gets the credit, only that it works beautifully." I felt tears welling in my eyes, remembering that conversation vividly. What I didn't understand then, what the world is only beginning to understand now, is that Octavia Thorne wrote the original code for SecureNet, the foundation of Blackridge's security platform. She architected Deep Shield when competitors said real-time threat detection was impossible. She solved the scalability challenges for Nexus when our entire development team was at an impasse. Dominic paused, surveying the rapt audience. The story of Blackridge Technologies isn't just about innovation or market dominance. It's about a brilliant woman whose contributions were systematically minimized, whose insights were routinely appropriated, and who nevertheless continued creating extraordinary technology that has protected millions of systems worldwide. Today, she stands before you not as someone's wife or silent partner, but as the visionary technologist and decisive leader she has always been. Please join me in welcoming the true genius behind Blackridge Technologies, my mother, Octavia Thorne. The applause was thunderous as I walked onto the stage, embracing Dominic briefly before taking my place at the podium. Looking out at the sea of faces, many of them young women just beginning their technology careers, I felt the weight of 40 years of silence lifting from my shoulders. "Thank you for that generous introduction," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my throat. For most of my career, I worked in the background, focusing on creation rather than recognition. There's a certain freedom in anonymity, the ability to solve problems without concern for public perception or market expectations. I paused, gathering my thoughts before continuing. But there's also a cost to that invisibility. When contributions go unacknowledged, patterns of erasure become normalized. When brilliant women are relegated to supporting roles, regardless of their capabilities, we all lose potential innovations, perspectives, and leadership. For the next 40 minutes, I shared my journey, from programming prodigy to co-founder to invisible partner to CEO. I explained the technical challenges we had overcome in developing Blackridge's core technologies, illustrated with code examples, and architecture diagrams that demonstrated the elegance of our solutions. Throughout the presentation, I maintained a careful balance, acknowledging Roland's genuine contributions while reclaiming my own achievements. This wasn't about vilifying him, but about restoring historical accuracy and providing a complete picture of Blackridge's development. "The lesson I hope you'll take from my experience," I concluded, "is not that partnership is inherently flawed or that recognition should be your primary goal. Rather, it's that your work deserves documentation, your contributions merit acknowledgement, and your voice belongs in every room where decisions about your creations are made." The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 2 minutes. As the applause finally subsided, the moderator opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up throughout the audience, but one in particular caught my attention. A young woman in the front row who reminded me powerfully of myself 4 decades earlier. "Dr. Thorne," she began, her voice slightly tremulous with nervousness. "I'm developing a machine learning framework that my advisor keeps presenting as his own work. How do I assert myself without damaging my academic future?" The question resonated deeply, echoing challenges I had faced repeatedly throughout my career. "Document everything," I advised. "Maintain separate repositories of your work, including timestamped development logs. Build relationships with other faculty who can witness and validate your contributions. And most importantly, find allies, other students, industry mentors, administrators who understand the dynamics at play." I leaned forward, making direct eye contact with her. "Your work matters. Your ideas matter. And while the path to proper recognition may be challenging, it's a battle worth fighting. Not just for yourself, but for every woman who will follow in your footsteps." The Q&A session continued for another 30 minutes, ranging from technical inquiries about our security protocols to questions about navigating male-dominated corporate environments. Throughout, I was struck by the hunger for authentic guidance from someone who had experienced the challenges these women were facing. As the session concluded, I found myself surrounded by attendees eager to continue the conversation. Many shared their own stories of diminishment and erasure, while others sought specific advice about establishing themselves in technical leadership roles. Hours later, as the last of the summit attendees departed, I returned to my office to find an elaborate floral arrangement on my desk. The card read simply, "To the woman who never needed anyone's permission to be extraordinary. L&D." Tears sprang to my eyes at this gesture from my children, who had witnessed both my silent competence throughout their childhood and my reclamation of authority in recent months. That evening, as I drove home to the Aurelian Heights estate, now transformed into a space that reflected my own taste and priorities, I reflected on the journey of the past few months, from invisible partner to public figure, from supporting player to acknowledged innovator, from Roland's wife to Octavia Thorne. The road ahead remained challenging. Blackridge was still rebuilding trust with investors, Roland's legal proceedings continued to generate occasional headlines, and competitors were naturally attempting to exploit our temporary vulnerability. Yet for the first time in decades, I felt completely aligned with my true self. The technical prodigy who had fallen in love with coding, the visionary who had co-founded Blackridge, the leader who was now guiding it into a more transparent and innovative future. As I pulled into the driveway, my phone chimed with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Meridian Technology Achievement Awards. Nomination." I smiled, recognizing life's occasional poetic symmetry. 40 years after being relegated to the role of supportive wife, at the same award ceremony where Roland was celebrated as a tech pioneer, I had been nominated in my own right. The journey from invisibility to recognition had been neither quick nor easy, but standing firmly in my own identity, acknowledged for my own achievements, I knew with absolute certainty it had been worth every step. 6 months after the women. In Technology Summit, I found myself standing before the full-length mirror in my redesigned bedroom, adjusting the midnight blue silk gown I'd chosen for the Meridian Technology Achievement Awards. The ceremony represented a full-circle moment, not merely recognition for my technical contributions, but symbolic closure of a chapter that had begun 4 decades earlier. "You look magnificent," Lyra observed from where she lounged on the chaise, watching me prepare. She had arrived the previous evening from Shanghai, where she was establishing Blackridge's new AI research division. "I feel different than I expected," I admitted, smoothing the fabric across my shoulders. Not nervous exactly, but contemplative. "You're allowed to enjoy this, you know," she said gently. After everything you've been through, you deserve a night of pure celebration. Dominic appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his tuxedo. The car's ready whenever you are. And I checked with the event coordinator. They have your acceptance speech loaded in the teleprompter as backup. I won't need it, I replied. After 40 years of practiced silence, I find I have no shortage of words now. We arrived at the Meridian Grand Hotel precisely at 7 o'clock. The red carpet, flanked by photographers and technology journalists, stretched toward the entrance where ice sculptures and holographic displays created an atmosphere of innovation and elegance. As our car approached the drop-off point, I experienced a moment of déjà vu, recalling similar arrivals with Roland over the years, always a step behind, always in his shadow. This time, as the valet opened my door, I stepped forward into the flashbulbs alone, flanked by my children, the new generation of Blackridge leadership walking proudly beside, not behind, their mother. Dr. Thorne, how does it feel to be nominated? For Innovator of the Year after decades of working behind the scenes? A reporter called out. I paused, offering a genuine smile. It feels like coming home to myself. Inside the grand ballroom, nearly 1,000 guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. The cream of Meridian City's technology sector gathered to celebrate the year's achievements. I noticed Roland immediately. He sat at a table near the back, granted permission to attend as part of his plea agreement's community service component. Our eyes met briefly across the room. He raised his water glass in a small, acknowledging gesture. I nodded in return, then turned away to greet colleagues and competitors who approached with warm congratulations. Vincent Nakamura, CEO of our primary competitor, intercepted me with a rueful smile. I owe you an apology, Octavia. For years, I negotiated exclusively with Roland, believing he was the technical mind behind Blackridge. Had I known the truth, I would have sought your insights directly. The past can't be rewritten, I replied diplomatically, but the future remains unscripted. As we found our seats for dinner, I was surrounded by the new Blackridge executive team, Xavier, now Chief Technology Officer, Margot, promoted to Chief of Staff, and several rising stars I'd elevated from middle management. The company table buzzed with energy and optimism, a marked contrast to the stilted corporate dinners of Roland's era. The Master of Ceremonies, tech journalist Priya Venkatesan, took the stage as dessert was served. Tonight, we celebrate innovation, perseverance, and the courage to challenge established narratives, she began. This year's nominees represent not just technical excellence, but the human stories behind our digital transformation. Category after category was announced: Best Startup, Most Innovative Application, Excellence in AI Ethics, each winner receiving thunderous applause. Finally, Priya reached the evening's premiere award. The Innovator of the Year represents the highest achievement in our field, recognizing sustained contribution to technological advancement, visionary leadership, and profound impact on the industry. This year's nominees include Dr. Marcus Chen for breakthrough quantum computing algorithms, Sarah Johansson for revolutionary biotech interfaces, and Dr. Octavia Thorne for foundational contributions to cybersecurity architecture and corporate leadership transformation. The screens displayed montages of each nominee's work. When my segment appeared, showing the evolution of Blackridge's security platforms alongside recent footage from the Women in Technology Summit, I heard Lyra's sharp intake of breath beside me. And the Meridian Technology Achievement Award for Innovator of the Year goes to... Priya opened the envelope with deliberate ceremony. Dr. Octavia Thorne. The ballroom erupted. As I rose, accepting embraces from my children and colleagues, the standing ovation swept through the room like a wave. I made my way to the stage, conscious of every step, every breath, every heartbeat, marking this moment of recognition. Priya handed me the crystal trophy, an elegant spiral design representing innovation's upward trajectory. Dr. Thorne, your acceptance speech, please. I approached the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, colleagues, competitors, journalists, and notably, Roland in the back row, his expression unreadable in the dimmed lighting. 40 years ago, I began, my voice strong and clear. I wrote the first lines of code for what would become Blackridge Technologies. I was 25, newly married, and convinced that technical excellence would naturally lead to recognition and respect. The room fell absolutely silent, everyone sensing the weight of the moment. I was naive. Over the subsequent decades, I learned that brilliance alone isn't enough when systems are designed to elevate certain voices while muting others. I discovered that innovation can be credited to those who market it, rather than those who create it. I experienced firsthand how easily contributions can be erased from the historical record when power dynamics favor selective memory. I paused, letting the words settle. But I also learned something far more valuable, that circumstances change only when we demand change. That silence, however comfortable, perpetuates systems of inequity, and that reclaiming our narrative isn't selfish or vengeful, it's necessary for everyone who follows in our footsteps. My gaze swept across the younger faces in the audience, particularly the women who had attended the summit months earlier. To those just beginning their journey in technology, document your work meticulously. Celebrate your achievements publicly. Build networks of support and recognition. And never, never allow anyone to convince you that your contributions are less valuable because they're delivered quietly or collaboratively. I lifted the award slightly. This recognition isn't just for me. It's for every woman whose code was attributed to someone else. Every innovator whose ideas were co-opted by those with louder voices. Every technical pioneer whose name was omitted from the patents they helped create. Looking forward, Blackridge Technologies is committed to transparency in attribution, equity in recognition, and fostering an environment where brilliance is acknowledged regardless of its source. We're establishing the Thorne Fellowship for Women in Cybersecurity, funding research and development with full credit to all contributors. As I concluded, I found Roland's face in the crowd once more. Finally, I want to address the complexity of human relationships in professional settings. People are neither purely heroes nor villains. We're all capable of both elevation and erasure, support and sabotage. The key is recognizing these patterns in ourselves and others, then choosing consciously how we'll proceed. Thank you for this honor. I accept it not as a conclusion, but as a beginning, the start of an era where contribution and recognition are more perfectly aligned. The applause that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes. As I returned to my seat, I caught glimpses of tears in many eyes, including Lyra's and Dominic's. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of congratulations and photographs. Later, as the formal program concluded and guests mingled over champagne, Roland approached our table. The month since his guilty plea had aged him visibly, his hair now completely white, his posture slightly stooped, the confident swagger replaced by measured steps. "Congratulations, Octavia," he said quietly. "Your speech was illuminating." "Thank you, Roland." I studied him carefully, searching for traces of sarcasm or bitterness, finding only what appeared to be genuine resignation. "I wanted you to know, I've been attending therapy. Part of my plea agreement initially, but I've continued voluntarily." He glanced at Lyra and Dominic, who watched our interaction warily. "I'm beginning to understand the depth of damage I caused, not just professionally, but personally, to all of you." "Understanding is a start," I acknowledged. "Acting on that understanding is what matters." He nodded slowly. "I'm selling the Aspen House and the yacht. The proceeds will fund an endowment for ethical business practices at Westlake University." It seemed appropriate. That's a positive step. An awkward silence stretched between us until Roland cleared his throat. I won't keep you from your celebration. I just wanted to pay my respects and... He hesitated, vulnerability flickering across his features. To say that I'm proud of what you've accomplished, what you've always been capable of accomplishing. As he turned to leave, Dominic called out, "Dad." Roland paused, looking back hopefully. "We're having brunch tomorrow at Hearthstone Cafe, if you'd like to join us." Roland's eyes widened in surprise. Yes, thank you. I'd like that very much. After he departed, Lyra turned to her brother. Are you sure about brunch? Dominic shrugged. He's trying. That counts for something. He looked at me. Besides, Mom's right. People are complicated. Maybe it's time. We started dealing with that complexity instead of avoiding it. The next morning brought unexpected snow. Fat flakes drifting lazily past the windows of Hearthstone Cafe as our reconfigured family gathered around a corner table. Roland arrived precisely on time, dressed casually in clothes I didn't recognize. Perhaps purchased after our separation, representing his new, humbler circumstances. Conversation started tentatively, focusing on safe topics like Lyra's work in Shanghai and Dominic's latest app development project. Gradually, as coffee cups were refilled and plates cleared, the dialogue deepened. I've been reading about narcissistic personality patterns, Roland offered unexpectedly. My therapist suggested I might recognize some traits in myself. Dominic nearly choked on his coffee. You think? Dom, I cautioned gently. No, he's right to be skeptical, Roland said. I spent 40 years crafting a narrative where I was always the hero, always the victim when challenged. It's unsettling to recognize how thoroughly I convinced myself of that fiction. What changed? Lyra asked, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding her residual anger. Losing everything, Roland replied simply. When you strip away the company, the reputation, the carefully constructed image, you're left with just yourself, and I didn't like what I found. The vulnerability in his voice was unprecedented. Throughout our marriage, Roland had projected unshakable confidence, deflecting any suggestion of personal fault with charm or irritation. This version, uncertain, introspective, was entirely foreign. I've been writing, he continued, not for publication, just processing, trying to understand how I became someone who could systematically erase his wife's contributions while convincing himself it was justified. And what have you concluded? I asked, genuinely curious. That I was terrified, he admitted. From our first meeting at Westlake, you outshone me intellectually. Every achievement, every innovation confirmed what I feared, that I was the lesser partner. Instead of celebrating your brilliance, I felt threatened by it. So I constructed a reality where your contributions were supportive rather than foundational. The rawness of his confession hung heavy over our table. Lyra reached across to squeeze my hand, while Dominic studied his father with an expression caught between anger and pity. I don't expect forgiveness, Roland added quickly. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand the magnitude of what I stole from you, Octavia. Not just credit or recognition, but the fundamental right to be seen as yourself. I appreciate your honesty, I replied carefully. Healing isn't linear for any of us, but acknowledgement is a necessary first step. We parted ways outside the cafe with tentative plans for another family meal the following month. As I watched Roland walk, away through the gentle snowfall, I reflected on the unpredictable nature of human transformation. Whether his evolution was genuine remained to be seen, but I found myself hoping it was, not for my sake, but for his. In the months that followed, Blackridge Technologies flourished under its restructured leadership. The transparency initiatives I'd implemented attracted top talent from across the industry, particularly women who'd grown frustrated with traditional tech culture. Our stock price not only recovered, but reached record highs as investors recognized the value of diverse perspectives. In innovation, the Thorne Fellowship launched with impressive funding, supporting 20 women pursuing advanced degrees in cybersecurity. I insisted on teaching one seminar each semester, finding unexpected joy in nurturing the next generation of technical pioneers. On the first anniversary of my appointment as CEO, we unveiled Nexus 2.0, a completely reimagined security platform incorporating AI-driven threat prediction and quantum-resistant encryption. The development team, now equally balanced between genders, had produced something truly revolutionary. "Your mother's fingerprints are all over this code," Xavier commented during the launch event. "Elegant solutions to complex problems. That's pure Octavia." "Actually," I corrected with a smile, "it's pure collaboration. Every significant innovation in this platform originated from team dialogue and diverse perspectives. That's the future of technology. Not individual genius, but collective brilliance." The media coverage of Nexus 2.0 invariably referenced the company's dramatic transformation over the past year. Several profiles painted me as a phoenix rising from the ashes of my marriage, but I rejected that narrative. I hadn't risen from ashes. I'd stepped out of shadows I should never have occupied in the first place. 3 years after that fateful anniversary dinner at Bellissimo's, I stood in my office, now thoroughly personalized with technical books, family photographs, and awards acknowledging both past innovations and current leadership, preparing for our annual shareholders' meeting. Margot entered with the final agenda. "The board unanimously approved your recommendation to establish an independent ethics oversight committee," she reported. "And the employee satisfaction survey results are remarkable, 97% positive, with particularly high scores for leadership transparency and recognition of contributions." Excellent. Company culture transformation isn't just about grand gestures. It's about consistent daily commitment to equity and acknowledgement. "Oh, speaking of acknowledgement," Margot added with a knowing smile, "there's a delegation from the Computer History Museum waiting in the conference room. They want to discuss updating their exhibit on cybersecurity pioneers to properly reflect your role in developing foundational protocols." I laughed, remembering how I'd once believed technical excellence would naturally lead to recognition. The path had been far more circuitous than my younger self could have imagined, but ultimately more rewarding for its complexity. As I headed toward the conference room, I passed the wall where Roland's portraits once hung, now replaced with a timeline of Blackridge innovations featuring photographs of every contributor, regardless of role or recognition. My own image appeared periodically, but no more prominently than others who'd shaped our success. That evening, I returned to my thoroughly reimagined home, walls now lined with books, laboratories converted to a personal workshop where I still coded for pleasure, gardens redesigned for contemplation rather than display. The estate felt genuinely mine for the first time in decades. Settling into my study with tea and the latest quantum computing journals, I reflected on the journey from invisible partner to acknowledged innovator. The technology industry remained imperfect, still grappling with systemic biases and attribution inequities. But change was visible, measurable, accelerating. My phone chimed with a message from Roland. A simple note about an article he'd read discussing the importance of documenting women's contributions to early computing. Our relationship had evolved into something neither marriage nor friendship, but rather a careful acknowledgement of shared history and divergent paths. As twilight settled over Meridian City, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, I opened my development environment and began coding. Not for Blackridge, not for recognition, but for the pure joy of creation that had first drawn me to technology 45 years ago. The algorithm taking shape on my screen was elegant, efficient, and entirely unnecessary for any current project. I saved it to my personal repository with a smile, knowing that somewhere in the city, perhaps, at this very moment, Another young woman was discovering the magic of making machines dance to her commands. The future stretched ahead, rich with possibility. Blackridge Technologies would continue evolving, the Thorne Fellowship would nurture new talent, and the industry would gradually reshape itself into something more equitable and transparent. But tonight, I coded simply because I could, because creativity, once liberated from the constraints of others' expectations, flows as naturally as breath. The cursor blinked steadily on my screen, awaiting the next command, the next innovation, the next chapter in a story that was finally fully my own. As the clock struck midnight, I saved my work and closed my laptop, at peace with past, present, and future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to shape technology's evolution and its culture. But tonight, I celebrated the profound satisfaction of living authentically, no longer in shadows, no longer silenced, no longer accepting anything less than complete recognition of my contributions to the digital world we'd built together. The woman who had once coded in obscurity now stood firmly in the light of her own achievements, her legacy secured not by awards or accolades, but by the transformation she'd sparked in an industry finally learning to value all its voices equally. And that, I knew with absolute certainty, was the greatest innovation of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.